Thank you for doing this show. How's it going today? How are you?
Very good. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for
It's
having
hard.
me on. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's harvest, so I'm cramming things in, but I can. It's time to slow down. The grapes are all in tank, so I can chill out now.
Life will go on. It's 2020, but life will go on, right?
Oh, it's rough. Okay, so the reason that Lance and I connected, just so have some background to this podcast, was I was hoping to make some wine for Naked Wines this year. I am going to make some wine for Naked Wines, but my portfolio sort of got trimmed down, so I'm going to make some Grenache. But I've been hoping to make some rosé, and at a volume such that Lance got word of it and offered to use some of the new technology from Pellenc, sort of the press in field technology, and we'll get into that into some detail here in a minute. But that's kind of how we connected, because Lance down in Templeton, right, in Paso Robles.
Templeton, California.
All right.
Pretty
So
special place. Pretty special place here in California, Templeton.
Small
town.
Are you getting all over the state, Lance, at this point? Or are you kind of focused in Central Valley?
Pretty much the Central Coast, and then the southern end of the Central Valley is what we cover out of the store here in Paso Robles. And since start of 2017, we got the Pellenc store running here in Paso. And since that time, I haven't had to go up to Napa and Sonoma, so I don't get to see my friends up there as much. But yeah, so it's kind of nice. 10 minutes from home.
Okay. Les, how long have you been with Pellenc?
Since 2002. It's been a nice ride, good ride.
Okay. So there's a number of technologies that we could talk about, but Lance and I were talking before we started recording and sort of decided that we would narrow this down a little bit and maybe focus on some of the harvest items being harvested right now. So could we start by talking about the evolution and what you know of in terms of what used to be available for machine harvesting, and then what is available now, and what are some of the features for the top end Pellenc machine harvesting technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Definitely have had some years to watch that evolution, right? And when I sort of showed up on the scene, it was late 90s. A lot of older machines that hadn't been changed out from sort of the first harvesters that were showing up late 70s and through the 80s. And so these machines were, they picked the grapes, but they also sent in a lot of unwanted material, like MOG, they call it, material other than grapes. And so yeah, once I got to ride on a grape harvester in 1997, fell in love with those machines, and went to work for Pellenc in 2002. And the big shift happened for harvesters. Pellenc came out with a thing called selective process, and this was a special sorting or berry separation and sorting, all done right there on the harvester. And this was we first tested it, at least here in the U.S. We first tested it on a machine in late 2008. And in 2009, we sold just a sort of a preliminary short run of these machines, and everybody started seeing the fruit coming off of it. And it was just bins full of berries, and most of the time it looked, beautiful. And so since that time, selective is almost a verb now. The winemakers, hey, pick it, selective it, pick it with selective. So it's become a staple. It's been sort of the upper echelon of picking since that time. And yeah, everybody's loving the fact that they can get fruit that nice off of these harvesters.
I remember I was working up at R.H. Phillips up above Davis when I first went to Davis, and it was a big ranch. They were doing quite a bit of machine picking, but they had the old school style that was like the horseshoe that would go over the row and shake over the row. And I remember that, like, there was two crews. There was the harvesting crew, and then there was the crew that would go in behind it to fix all the broken end posts and all the T-posts, because it beat the shit out of the vineyard, as well as picking the grapes.
Lots of energy in those machines. Lots and lots of energy. The vineyard felt it when it was done.
So I think the first question that I remember I had, and I know many people have, is when they see these new generation of harvesters, how do they get the berries off the vine so gently and keep berries intact? What's the secret?
Yeah, the first thing was vineyards really started being set up nicely for these harvesters, the newer generation of harvesters. So the vineyards moving towards VSP really helped the harvesters. And so that was sort of something that in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, we saw a lot of, VSP going in with the growth of the industry. And then with that, the harvesters that had been out, they did a little bit different concept with shaking the vine. They would squeeze the vine, but they sort of whipped it really far from side to side. And these newer machines came out with what we call shorter stroke. And so it sort of gets more of a short, high speed vibration almost, if you will. So we squeeze gently and we go really short with that swing, but we go high RPMs. And we get a lot of the rachis stays on the vine, and you just get the berries coming off. And so kind of a different change in the theory of how they pick, but it works. And the bins show, the bins look nice. So,
one thing I think that sometimes gets forgotten in machine harvesting situations is not just the fruit itself, but not having to deal with the rachis, and moving that outside or composting that, which is it's a real hassle, especially if there's, we've been through the light brown apple moth days and what else? All the bugs that force people to have their rachis composted in a certified facility or taken off property. That's one big advantage, just not even having to deal with that. Do you happen to know what percentage of grape weight is in a rachis?
Sure. So yeah, the number is it varies. So on varieties where the berry doesn't want to come away from the stem as easily, you'll get more rachis and vice versa. So depending upon the variety, it can be something like 3% to say 7%. That's a pretty fair range right there. That sort of is pretty real. We've done many trials with different wineries and growers, collaborated with them, and that's where the number sort of ends up. And so yeah, it has, with the new selective process on the harvesters, it's changed the industry a little bit in that the growers, they're saving money being able to switch from hand picked to machine picked. So that's a plus for the growers, but on the flip side, they are losing some weight that they used to sell to the wineries and get paid for, that 3 to 7%, let's say. And so there's definitely been like a shift in the industry, which it caused, and it's just undeniable. It just sort of had to happen because the wineries and the winemakers want the selective pick fruit now. And so now the growers, now they have to come together and they have to figure out, okay, so you're saving this, we're going to save that, but we know that each one can sort of share in that savings.
Okay, I'm going to bring up the first one of the videos of, okay, where are we going to go? Desktop. Give me a second to bring up this video. But as we're talking, I want to play that video in the background if I can, so people that are watching this video can see this selective.
There you go.
You think the Silver Oak video would be the one? There we go.
Silver Oak, that one's, they did a very good job in putting together this video shoot. This was great. Got drone footage of the fruit rolling across the rollers on the selective system, and it's nighttime footage, which is real. That's they want to pick that fruit at night. They want to pick it when it's cold. so that's kind of how it always happens. And so they took that video shoot. I think it was probably near Alexander Valley, but I shouldn't say, I don't know the exact location, but I would guess somewhere around there.
Les, was it the first generation of these harvesters that had that onboard, the stemming and sorting and be able to remove moss?
Yeah, what about that?
Was it the first generation, or was it only in later generations where you had that onboard sorting?
Yeah, so that onboard sorting first came available in 08, in 2008. The very first place that we ran it, the selective sorting here, was up in Mendocino County early on in 08. And it's just taken off since that time. We're in the second generation, so selective process 2, if you will. It says it right on the side of the bin there. So this is the second generation of it. So it's been out since 08.
Okay, and could you sort of maybe describe the path of the grape as it falls off the vine and then all the way through into the holding containers?
Of course, yeah. So there's bow rods that are flexible and pliable, and these bow rods squeeze the vine as we go by. The rods on each side of the canopy of the vine. We use 5 or 6 of them, or somewhere in the 4 to 6 rods per side. We gently squeeze the vine. It swings side to side at very high RPM. And that motion, that inertia, causes the berry to come away from the stem. It falls into some conveyors which move up the machine. And then through that, while it's in those cups and traveling up, we have a couple of fan systems to pull out some leaves. And then ultimately, it falls onto a small grid conveyor where we have berry separators that de-stem, if you will, any last berries where there might be a cluster there, and it removes the berries from the stems. And then the second stage of selective is all of it goes across this bank of rollers, and you can see the rollers that are just dropping like stems and petioles and just mock material other than grapes off the side of the machine as it goes. All the good berries, however, drop through those rollers, and they go in the tanks and ultimately to the fermenters.
Okay. And what's the capacity, the holding capacity of those onboard containers?
Good question. So it's 3 tons total. So there's 2 tubs on there, and that's 3 tons between the 2 of them. That model right there is the model with the 2 bins. We also have a model that we sell quite frequently in like Lodi or the Central Coast, lots of places on the Central Coast with longer rows, high yields, right? Like even in Lodi, we have a side discharge model. So it's this on the fly unloading of fruit into a gondola that's tracking alongside the harvester at the same time. It's necessary to do it that way in these long rows, high yields. You just sort of can't get through there with the bins, but we have a model that fits each sort of, region or situation.
What are some of the ideal varieties for machine harvesting, and what's tough?
So Cabernet is beautiful to pick.
Sure.
Syrah is beautiful to pick. Merlot is, when you have a glass of Merlot in your hand, you know that one was tough to pick. Those berries just do not like to come away from the rachis or from the stem. There's a number of tougher varieties that you're picking that variety. It's just, it needs a little more energy. And but yeah, definitely, which ones you're picking. Pinot Noir is really interesting. You sort of have days where you have just whole berries like you saw in that photo or that video, and then some days where it's a little harder. But something that is interesting, when you first take a machine into a vineyard that has been handpicked its entire life, right? You really sort of have to, prepare the owner to say, hey, this is the first time we're going to run a machine through here, but what's going to happen is you're going to see the effects of that. There's going to be a few canes that maybe are broken, or that you maybe would prefer that, it's not like that. But what happens is over, like, once you pick that first year, the second year, and the third year, and then the years thereafter, you just don't see that same sort of, canes that are broken or whatever. So, but it is something worth noting, because right now, what's going on is there's tons and tons of fruit that's being picked by machine that had not been picked by machine. And this is for a number of reasons. The market right now, as far as oversupply of grapes, is definitely an impact. Labor availability it was already a problem, and now we got COVID. So,
right.
You have these farm crews, so you have that, and then we get hit with the fires, right? We get hit with fires literally from Okanagan, BC. I'm sure they're probably seeing the smoke from Washington you walk outside Pellenc store here in Paso Robles, it's smoke everywhere, and it's just been on off with smoke in different regions. So people are testing, people are trying to figure out a way, when do I pick? How do I get more picked in a shorter amount of time? Wineries are searching in regions where they don't normally maybe buy fruit, but they're buying fruit right there because not as much smoke taint. And they're very willing to take machine picking. And so suddenly you see machines popping up in, Santa Rita Hills and Santa Lucia Highlands, or, you just in areas that you maybe don't see them as frequently. And this is going to be a game changer, because once they've experienced working with the fruit, then the winemakers can say, okay, so this is how I always did it in the past, and this is how I reached a really high level. But working with this fruit, I realized that I can make a really high level of wine. I can reach the standards that I have. Maybe I have to do this different, or I treat it differently in this part or this stage, but they can make some amazingly high quality wines, high scoring wines. So big changes going on right now in the industry as far as mechanized harvesting of wine grapes.
Sure. Are many people harvesting whites?
Yeah. Whites and reds for sure. We did that mobile press. We ran that mobile press trial. That was a great collaboration with a vineyard management company down in Santa Ynez in Santa Barbara County, and a winery out of Napa. And they were buying Sauvignon Blanc. Wonderful teams. The collaboration went great. We picked Sauvignon Blanc for this wonderful winemaker, and we picked the white Sauvignon Blanc, and it went directly into the press. We had that Sauvignon Blanc pressed off within 2 to 3 hours. We had it pressed off from the moment that it was picked. And that is not easy to do with, big volumes of, like sort of larger volumes. You and I, we see a lot of trucks running up and down California highways, and they've got these, the grapes in there that are moving all the time. And so this was definitely a new thing, that we have a mobile press. And very interesting, being able to pick whites with a harvester, but then getting it pressed off quickly and getting it into a protected environment inside of an insulated, compartmentalized tanker truck. So that was pretty cool, really cool stuff. First time we did that in the USA, first time. Well, it's been done before, but the first time that we've done it, I should say it that way.
Right. Okay, so this is, can you see my screen here, Lance?
Absolutely.
Okay, so for those that are just listening, we've got a picture here of a tractor with a press behind it, and there's a hose. The press is being fed through the axial feed to the side, and then there's a little hopper, and I assume that's where the harvester is going to back up and unload the grapes into that little hopper?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I guess we actually picked into for this trial, we picked into small bins, and then we had that hopper on top of that must pump there. We just front tipped. You can see that. You can see it in that one photo where Pat, the CEO of Pellenc America, he was dumping that front tipper there, dumping the fruit into that must pump. And yeah, we fed axial feed. And that in this trial, we went with that axial feed pumping from fruit that was in macro bins. But ultimately, Jim, what this looks like is it could be as simple as 2 trailers. You got the mobile press, and the second trailer is going to have a receiving hopper with a must pump on it. And you're just the harvesters will dump the fruit into gondolas behind tractors. The tractors will pull up to that receiving hopper, like 6 to 8 ton receiving hopper on a trailer with a must pump.
Yeah. And
they'll just tip it, and it'll go straight axial feed in, and we'll be able to load up those presses in a hurry and not have to deal with all the labor of, the macro bins. But for this trial, that's how we did that.
Okay. And tell me, what's the capacity on the press?
We have 3 sizes that are the mobile press series. So this one here was an SPC 80, so an 80 hectoliter. Then we have a SPC 110, which is 18 tons of, so we have a 80, 110, and a 150. So talking in terms of, so let's say machine picked fruit, we have 12 tons, we have 18 tons, and we have 24 tons per press cycle. That's what we have. Our presses actually go all the way up to 600 hectoliters for big wineries. But those are the sizes for the mobile press.
Okay, right. And that's, I assume, we've got a picture here of the Skikos tanker that's going to be hauling away the juice. I assume that was sized so that you could fit, somewhat handily into the containers, and the normal containers that are like 3,200 gallons or 6,400 gallons for a full tanker truck.
Yeah, it was super cool. We had of the 12, so we did 2 12-ton press off cycles, and we got 1,700 gallons of free run, and that went in the front compartment twice. So we had 30, so say 24 tons that we picked with machine, and then we did 2 press cycles, and then we did, and so we ended up with 3,400 gallons of free run in the front compartment and 1,080 gallons in the second compartment.
Okay, cool.
It was great. They were filled right to the rim, Sean Birmingham at Skikos was great. He was a part of the collaboration, and he really helped us out. We looked hard at, like, okay, what's this look like? Cost of shipment, cost of hauling either grapes or hauling, the juice. And you run the different numbers, and from what we ran the numbers together, and it's about a 25% savings, plus or minus 25% savings if you run it in the tanker. You're not moving all the pumice, so it's pretty exciting. It's got a ton of potential.
And as I was trying to make this work, trying to line up to have my grapes get pressed in the field, I was going back and forth with the Custom Crush winery, and the ability to bring in juice as opposed to grapes took $300 a ton off the processing cost. So that was a huge deal. That kind of made a big difference between my ability to do it or not. So, and obviously if a winery can just have a tanker show up and fill a tank, that negates all that processing work up front for them.
It's another example of, like, selective process. When it came out, suddenly it's a shift in how things are done, but there's cost savings to be had at the field level and at the winery level. So it's just a matter of sort of a shift in the industry and what's the norms. And with this whole tanker thing, we believe that there's going to be a lot of room for this type of implementation. And it just boils down to cost savings for wineries, cost savings for the vineyards. Well, opportunities, at least opportunities for the vineyards to reduce costs in hauling and maybe some other things that we could look at. But then also quality. This is a full-blown trial, and we've got a few of them lined up this season. So we're going to have the data. We're going to know. And we're going to taste those wines come next spring, to start to understand if we can verify, the difference. But I can tell you already, in this case, and this happens, if you see in that picture, there was another 24 tons that we picked the same night out of the same exact block at the same time. And so this trial, the control is, 24 tons that went in 6-ton tubs on doubles, and I know that trailer had to wait until late the afternoon to get unloaded. Just, and so it's sitting out there in the heat, it's sitting out there in the sun, and it's kind of the nature of the beast. It just happens all the time. We're trying to pack so much fruit into these wineries so fast that trucks end up sitting out, waiting to get unloaded for hours, right? So why not just pull up with the tanker in the back of the winery and just unload? So pretty cool.
And Lance, how were you where were you taking the press to clean it, to sanitize it before? Where do you clean it after? What does that sort of process look like for you?
That's an excellent question. There's a number of hurdles that we needed to cross to make this thing work. One was, you're taking this process that's normally done by the winemaking team out of their hands a bit, and you're saying, hey, show us the playbook, and we'll follow the rules. When it comes to additions, when it comes to what we do throughout that process, and then particularly the press cycles themselves. And so that was one aspect, but then sanitation. And so what we did was, with regards to sanitation, we had PTs on site, right? So we had a couple of 550-gallon PTs. Integrity Wine Company, this company has PTs. They rent all different sizes. And so we rented a couple of PTs from them, and we had them on site. So when we did our sanitation, which was protocol from the winery, we followed their lead on that, and we just filled those PTs, right? So that everything is captured. Everything was captured, and
okay, cool.
So we did that, and then on the protocols for the press cycles, what we've done is we've set up the press. The press has the technology now to where you can do a custom, cycle. You customize exactly how you want it done. And then in the morning, what we do is we email the winemaker exactly charts from that night, those 2 press cycles, how they went, and they can see exactly our steps in the phases and the different stages where we went to, and even we have a flow meter on the press.
Oh, cool.
So we know, so we can basically say, okay, when the flow gets down to a certain gallons per minute, then let's move on, right? Let's not keep pressing. Let's move on. So yeah, in this case, we did a free run, and we got, I think it was around 140, I think it was 142 gallons per ton, I want to say. And that was just free run, no pressing. Our presses have, a third of our press inside is all a screen. So it's a little bit unique. It's not these channels where everything has to kind of go through the channels. A third of the inside of the press is, or around a third, is these big screens. So we had all that free run. And yeah, we can send the winemaker in the morning exactly what the press cycles were like. That way, even though you take it out of, they're sort of handing off something that they cherish, and they need to make sure it's done right. So we can show that we did that right.
Sounds like a good job for an assistant winemaker to go out at night and make sure the SO2 ads get made and log all the volumes and times and all that sort of thing.
I love those guys. We had someone that was there as a part of from representing the winery, and he was there the first night, walked us through everything. The second night, he said, "Well, I think I'm going to take off, after we just kind of get started here." And yeah, we got, and I don't know, it was like an hour into it, and we said, "Okay, we got it." And he said, I think I'm going to just hang with you guys. And so he ended up staying through most of the night. It's pretty fun to see that pressing in the field. That's pretty amazing. A tanker right there is pretty cool.
Okay, so 2020 is this year where you're bringing this technology into California. How fast do you kind of expect to scale this up and make this more available?
I think what's going to happen, and I've seen it before, it's something new, it's something different. It's impactful. I don't know that it will have the same impact as the selective process on harvesters did. I don't think it will have that kind of impact where we were suddenly selling, 3-4 times the harvesters every year. But I think it's something that we'll see a limited run next year where, people will start to experience it. What's going to happen is there's going to be, maybe a couple wineries that are going to probably buy one next year. And then there's going to be maybe a couple of different custom operators that will buy, a couple of presses, and then they'll be able to offer that as a mobile pressing service. And so, that's pretty common, Jim. That's how new products for us go. Pellenc is always innovating. We always spend 10% of that's pretty much our goal, is to spend 10% of our annual profits on innovation and coming out with new products. And so when we come out with new products, that's pretty much always how it goes. You have that, you sort of see it for the first time, and then you have a year where it's kind of like you sell a few of them, and then after that you start to see the growth.
Is it usually the vineyard management companies that would be purchasing these for their clients?
So for me, I think it's going to be a little bit of all. It's going to be, like I was saying, it's going to be wineries at a certain size, okay?
Right.
At a certain size, and I think that's going to be the first ones, that'll do it. I think the other first ones will be either vineyard management companies that do custom harvesting, which many of them do that. So yeah, I think you're right, John, or Jim. I think it'll be a combination of wineries and then vineyard management companies that do custom harvesting. That's what that probably looks like. At least in the beginning, right? At least in the beginning. Right. And in the end, maybe there will be, like mobile bottling, for example, right? Maybe there will come a day where a winemaker or assistant winemaker wants to, start his own business, and he wants to do mobile pressing, but he doesn't want to get involved in harvesting or vineyard management or none of that. So that day will certainly, probably come, but I think that's maybe a year or two down the road.
Okay, sure. Okay, so we ran through all of these photos, and it's too early to have videos of this technology, but I'm sure by next year you'll have plenty, and that'll be cool to see. But most people know what a press looks like. Grapes go inside and juice comes out, so that's pretty straightforward. I do want to maybe step back to the harvesters a little bit and talk about some of the modules that you can pop on and off to do work outside of harvest. Can we talk about that for a couple minutes?
I'm glad you asked. It's something that I was hoping we could go back to just briefly, because we have a new, so Pellenc is most known for multifunction. So taking a grape harvester and turning it into a machine that works all year round. And the backstory on this is that Roger Pellenc in the early 90s, he he came to this engineer whose name is Mark Pellenc, and he said, "Hey, I know you know how to build harvesters, and I want to build a harvester." Because Pellenc had been doing trimmers and pruners and little things in his garage, literally in early 70s in his garage. Wow. And it's a 300 million euro a year company now. But so the early 90s, Roger Pellenc asked Mark, he said, "Hey, can you design, a harvester for me?" And Mark said, "Absolutely, I can do it." And he absolutely wanted multifunction. All right. Okay. We want to be able to use this harvester, not just for a month or two during the year and then put it away. Right. And so, Mark Pellenc designed the first, I don't know if it was absolutely the first, but it definitely became most notable in the industry. There's only about a handful of manufacturers of grape harvesters. So Pellenc became synonymous with multifunction. And so this year we came out with a new harvester that is sort of multifunction on steroids. Okay. So this machine we're calling it multitasking harvester. So now we're not only going to do spraying in the spraying and pruning, or start with pruning, right? So pruning in the winter, and then in the spring spraying, and later in the spring doing like leaf pulling and mowing and disking, multiple rows, all this stuff. Now this machine is capable of running tools that attach to the harvester, almost like transformer type stuff, right? It literally no tools even needed. You back under the thing like a camper shell on a pickup, with a pickup truck. But this thing lifts up and you press a button and it hydraulically locks down the tools and it auto recognizes the tools. But this new multitasking machine, the 60 series model, it can run tools on the front and on the back at the same time. In the past, we could do something out the front or out the back, but not usually both. And it was very difficult to do that. But now, literally on your screen in the harvester, the operator's got okay, I'm trimming out the front. I'm trimming 2 rows out the front, and I'm mowing and disking 2 rows out the back at the same time. He double clicks the joystick and he can see each and he can control each independent. So it's a new generation of multitasking machines.
Sounds like you need a new generation of operators too. That's a lot to keep your abreast of while you're driving.
It's funny. We have such wonderful operators out there. Our workforce, as you know, a lot of Hispanic, workforce, and these drivers, they get really good. They get really good. Obviously, some people take to it better than others. It just comes natural. But we found that we have to be heavy on the training side, right? So multifunction and multitasking is cool, but the reason why vineyard management companies and growers and wineries are moving and have been moving in this direction with harvester purchases and implement purchases is because of cost savings. You can take your costs and you can really reduce your farming costs by utilizing a machine that costs that much money, and you just keep that thing rolling. So it's really cost savings that's driving it, and just trying to become the most efficient, cost-efficient, farming practice, right? It's super competitive out there right now, super competitive. Got to find ways to reduce our cost of growing each ton of grapes. So that's what we're doing. We're a part of that. And that mechanization, I've been in this thing for, a number of years, a long time. It's been good for a long, long time. It seems like mechanization in the wine industry, it just continues to grow, or just continues to go more and more. There you go. That's a great video there, mowing 2 rows at a time.
Okay, and so this video brings up a question: what are the capabilities to work on land that is not flat? That's always a challenge.
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge. You got that exactly right. It's a challenge, and so it's a specialized piece of equipment without a doubt, right? It's a specialized piece of equipment. So, you know, training, we're heavy on operator training. We're heavy on mechanics training, right? So that our customers really get to almost a level of our own Pellenc mechanics. I mean, they're that good, and we train them. And it's also on me, you know, it's also on people who represent this line. We have the stores here in Paso, Santa Rosa, but we have dealers in Lodi, in Oregon, and throughout Oregon, multiple locations, and Washington. It's on the reps, it's on the people that are representing this equipment to really walk through those, each application, if you will, walk through each application and just make sure that, because you're right, like some of these applications are not going to fit every sort of, you know, every vineyard site. It's just not going to happen. And so being real about, you know, what will work and what won't work is super important.
What sort of grade, is there a top grade that you could drive on where the wheels could compensate for the difference in height between rows?
Yeah, so terracing of 30 inches right in there, or side hills of, you know, 25% or maybe, you know, a little more are doable with the side leveling that our machine has. So
okay.
So yeah, you can do some side hills. You know, the vertical slopes, right, up and down, are always you know, something you have to look at, and those are, everything always comes down to, you know, being close with the customer, understanding things like okay, if we mow, or say we disc every other row, which is sometimes popular, it's going to make that soil, you know, loose, and it's going to be harder for these machines to, you know, manage that soil type, right? Especially in these slopes. So we're really, you know, close and involved with the viticulture side, with those vineyard managers and with our harvester owners, and we try to do the best we can to give good advice.
Okay, so I pulled up a video here of some pruning. What can you tell us about this system?
So that is a TRP, precision pruner, and it has it's becoming more popular now, definitely becoming more popular now. This machine has infrared tracking of the cordon, and it has high-speed spinning blades, which make a nice fine cut. So right there, what we're trying to do is we're trying to average, you know, a 2 bud. Let's say that the common practice is to get to like 2 buds per spur, for example. So in this case here, that infrared tracking is going to make a cut. We tell the machine we want to have a cut like 2 inches, let's say 2 inches above the cordon, and the goal is to average 2 buds or something like that. 2 buds depends on, you know, what the vineyard manager wants, but we're just trying to mechanize something that costs a ton of money. And, you know, pruning cost is one of the largest costs throughout the year for a vineyard.
Yeah, but it can be so slow when you're doing it manually.
Yeah, so in this case, you know, with the TRP, you have to you make this pass, and then you're right there, and then you make a quick pass, we call it a touch-up pass, with a small hand crew, and you probably saved yourself, you know, another 20%, maybe more, but, you know, maybe 20% on your pruning cost. And all of these things, you know, multifunction, multitasking, reducing numbers of passes through the vineyard, precision pruning, all of these things pretty soon once you add them up, all of a sudden you're producing a great product, and you're producing it at a lot lower cost than someone having to do it all by hand.
Right. And so in this video where we're watching the pruning happening in this cordon style vineyard, there are blades high above that are chopping up the canes, because that's a big deal too, is going through the vineyard and after pruning and pulling all the brush out of the wires. That's another extra pass that's, no one likes to do that. It's a rough pass.
The big cost in the pruning phase is always, pulling brush, as you mentioned. And we have another machine so this is for cordon pruning. And then we have another machine that's new, that's out, that's kind of an interesting new machine. It's called the Klima. And that machine is interesting for two reasons. One, it's not Pellenc. It's actually manufactured from the Nigel family out of New Zealand. And of course, they've got a lot of cane pruning in New Zealand. And so they came up with a machine that does cane pruning and just nailed it. It's been out for, I think, 7 years plus or minus, and they've been selling it in New Zealand, and they've been, trying to find the right sort of playbook on how do we get this machine into the US and support it properly. And they just heard a lot of good things about Pellenc and about our support structure. And so they came to us and just said, hey, is there an opportunity there for us to partner up? And you guys represent our Klima pruners. And so we chose to do that. So now we're selling a product other than Pellenc. But this tool, one of the reasons we chose to do it is because it's just so unique. It reduces all of that brush pulling by hand to a machine pass, and then it turns it all into like sawdust. I mean, not sawdust. I mean, it's very small pieces, and there's a couple of things with the Klima that you sort of have to think about when you either have an existing vineyard and you need to do like a retro clip on the trellis. So there can be an incurred cost, or if you want to just, pull out the wires out of the trellis and you want to just do that, or you want to put in eco trellis, which is the trellis that actually is made for the Klima. Whatever you choose to do, pruning costs of cane pruned vineyards is so high that the cost savings on this machine is really good. And as you and I were talking, earlier offline, people are moving to cane prune. There's so many advantages, right? I mean, you know them. You've got health of the vineyard. Health of the vineyard is always quite good, and longevity of the vineyard, right? You've probably taken trips to Europe, and you see in France, you see a lot of cane prune vineyards, and you wonder, okay, well, why is that? Why is that? And then you ask them, well, hey, how long has this vineyard been in the ground, right? And then they tell you, I don't know how many decades, right? Like it's been a long, long time or whatever. And so, by the way, the cane prune vineyards work great with the harvesters because you don't have that spur that if you somehow, do some damage on a spur, then it takes some time, right, to sort of get that back, get that position back. But with cane prune vineyards, you're always getting those new canes every year. So really encouraged by the fact that just all the benefits of cane pruning and the fact that we have a tool to reduce the cost of, the high cost of cane pruning. That's one of the cons, with cane pruning is it just costs so much to prune.
Okay, so I'm going to show this another Klima video here, but so it looks like you got your crew going through and making, well, that's cordon. That's not cane, is it?
Yeah, that's cordon there.
Is this, let me see, I'll just jog it forward here.
Yeah, let's see what happens here.
Okay, it does look like it is a Klima system, right?
This is this was an experiment that was done this past year where they used the Klima in table grapes. So that's what you have right there. And you know, table grapes, they have to spend a ton of money on pruning. I mean, it is outrageous, right? So yeah, that's what that video is.
Well, that's a good shot there. You can see that it's lifted the wires. That's probably that system you were talking about, right? It's lifted out of the specialized clip up above the trellising, and then it's just going along those wires where all the brush is and chopping it up really finely as it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I've had opportunities to be with, you know, crew leaders doing pruning with really good pruners, and you sort of work with them, and you time how long it takes to pull brush in a cane prune wine grape vineyard, and it's like, it's a lot, you know, it's over 50%, and it's probably more, and so all of that, and you've just mechanized that and to the cost of a tractor pass plus the cost of the tool and maintenance, and you sort of have to throw all of that in there. But definitely a very special tool that is going to be saving wine grape growers and even table grape growers in the future a lot of money for their pruning aspects.
Okay, Lance, one thing I did want to talk about, one other implement is leaf pulling. This is something that I don't have any experience with. I know a lot of high-end winemakers who are making higher-end, more expensive wines are very hesitant to have machine leaf pulling as opposed to human, because they're worried about damage to fruit. What can you tell, how do you assuage winemakers' fears in that situation? I'll see if I can find a video of this as you're talking.
Sure. So yeah, leaf pulling is, in my mind, leaf pulling has become one of the machines, one of the mechanized passes that I'm super confident in proposing to small wineries that own their own vineyard, even where the winemaker is definitely intimately involved and very, you know, definitely keeping track of all aspects of what's happening to his fruit, right? So our latest leaf puller, it's a second generation of the soft touch leaf puller. And Pellenc leaf pullers came on the scene years ago. Our first one it did a good job, but had a lot of negatives. And so we came out with a new generation, and this was about 6 years ago, and it's called the soft touch leaf puller, and it's pretty special because it has a feature that allows us to not damage the berries, and it's soft touch, but it has this canopy tracking feature, and this video will probably show that. See once if it pops up here so that hydraulic in out right there, that ram is controlled by that white feeler plate. It's a stainless steel feeler plate on the front. And so so you have a setting there, and one of the things that happens with leafers in the past, if it's not tracking the canopy and applying the right pressure and moving away from the canopy, if the dryer moves too close to the vines, it can damage fruit. And so we've added this feature, which is pretty simple but truly effective, where it's canopy tracking. So that operator sets a dial of how sensitive the tracking is, and that's where that machine will sort of follow the canopy. But if he gets too far into the canopy, because it's hard to drive straight 100% of the time, there's sometimes you got you got varmint holes, you have rocks, you have all these different things going on. Pretty much impossible to drive 100% in the right spot all the time. So yeah, these leafers, and then probably the other thing that people really like about the Pellenc is that it takes the leaf and it pulls it, there's a vacuum created, and these two rollers, and these rollers sort of pull the leaf through the roller, and then we have a brush that sweeps the leaf off the back. So that's sort of the mechanism that's happening there. And so when a winemaker comes out, or when you're walking and touring a vineyard, it literally looks like hand crews were in there, Jim, because the leaves are all intact. The old leafers, or some of the leafers on the market, they kind of like disintegrate the leaves, right? They come through a fan and then they're gone. They're just like a million pieces. So so it looks wonderful. People like to see, a well manicured vineyard. They like to see that look. And so the Pellenc gives them that.
Okay, so in this video, Tractor's leafing both sides of the vine here, is that right?
Yeah, so this is one of the tools, that you can run on the Pellenc, multifunction machine. So that's a harvester. That's a harvester with the picking head off, rear counterweights on the back, and it's got a leafer on the front that's able to do two sides of the canopy at once. So there's another added value of the multifunctional harvester. You're doing, double the work in the same pass. So that's what that is.
If someone had not just a basic VSP, but they had the open V, can you change the angle of the leafers so that it fits the angle of the architecture of the vine?
So most of the time not. You can do that on that first model that goes on the front of a standard tractor. That's one of the Pellenc tools that actually works with like a quadrilateral system, or GDC, or Geneva double curtain. So again, really important to get to know all the equipment, know the applications that work, know which ones don't, and just make sure you don't make that mistake. And
awesome. Well, this is Lance. We've gone through over now. It's probably a good time to wrap it up. Tell me, what website should people go to find out more about Pellenc?
Yeah, go to pellencus.com. So it's all one word.
LENCUS.com.
Yep.
Okay. And then for the YouTube videos that we've been watching during this podcast, it's on the Pellenc US YouTube page. And I'll have links to all that in my podcast stuff. But Lance,
click and subscribe, right? Aren't we supposed to always say that? It seems like every YouTube video they say it, right down there.
Yeah. Was there any other technology that we didn't get to talk about today that you want to go over briefly before we wrap it up?
I just briefly, I wanted to make sure that people know, those mobile the presses that we were showing them. That's just a sliver of all the winery equipment now that we have. We're setting up complete wineries, small wineries with complete sorting lines, all the crush pad equipment that you could ever think of, pumps, optical sorters, everything, central automation, where you have one guy running all the crush pad, at least one person operating everything on the crush pad from one location. And we just have so much to offer with regards to new technologies in the wineries. And so you're going to be seeing even more Pellenc equipment, from the biggest, baddest wineries to the coolest luxury small wineries that are around. So we've been in there with optical sorters and selective destemmer sorters, but we're going to have a lot more equipment to offer them as well going forward.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else you want to mention before we sign off? I think we've covered a lot of stuff. It's been super cool.
No, we're just excited to be able to do what we do for the industry. I love all these people that I get to know. I keep telling my boys, hey, you gotta get into the agricultural world, whatever you do, they're great people. So for Pellenc to be able to provide a good product and just focus on support, that's what we love to do. It's our passion. And we appreciate you're giving me the chance to point out a few cool things about what we do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Lance. This has been great.
Thanks for the opportunity.